So just welcoming everybody in. I am just making sure that our replay is going to be recorded properly. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And just as a reminder, we do record the Q&A sessions and they are shared. So just as a reminder, if you want to, I'm going to pin myself anyway, but if you want to turn your camera on or off, that's up to you. All right. So welcome to those of you that are joining me here live. I'm happy to have you here. Thank you for joining me. If this is your first time joining me, we usually meet on the first and third Thursday of the month just to address any questions that may be coming up in your online courses. And I certainly encourage you to enter your questions in advance if you would like to. You should have access to all of the replays and also the links to submit your questions in advance inside your student dashboard. And the links to the calls we also have included in the Google Scheduler. So there's a link inside your student dashboard. You can click on it. It will add the schedule to your calendar, and the Zoom link is pretty much always the same. It's going to be in there as far out of as we have scheduled so far. And we also usually create an event in the Facebook group for that as well. The replays are in your student dashboard, and the replays are inside the Facebook group under the guides section, but you're only able to access that on a desktop. For whatever reason, I'm not able to access guides on a mobile phone. I don't think anybody is. Yes, so those are just some of the housekeeping things. If at any time you feel like you're kicked out of the Zoom space or whatever, if you just refresh the page and re-enter, it should allow you back in. All right, and if you require closed captioning, there should be a button at the bottom that allows you to turn it on for your viewing pleasure. Right, so the way I like to do this is usually I address the questions that were submitted in advance first, and then as I go through, I take pauses and I just check in and make sure for those of you that are joining me live that this is resonating with you. And then I usually do take pauses between questions just to ask if there are any questions popping up, as I go. So I certainly invite you to type those into the chat, and I will create spaces where I will look for those and be sure to respond to them in real time. All right, so if you'd like to just type your name and give a little shout out and let me know that you're here. I would love to see who's here today. And then we will just dive right in. Okay. So the first question that we received this month, how do I distinguish my attachment fears from intuition? So have you ever felt as if your feelings or emotions were really compelling you beyond your better judgment, right? Maybe you've experienced butterflies in your stomach and you felt like that was getting confused with a sort of fearful anxiety coming up around the relationship. And so you might find yourself wondering, does that mean that all butterflies are bad? What about gut intuition? What about my instinct about something? Is it really just my nervous system that keeps getting triggered, or is there something to this? Can I have a genuine sense about something that I can trust, right? Whether it is good or bad for me. So in my online community, a lot of individuals share this question. And if you can relate, then this next segment is going to be for you. And we're going to explore this in 3 different ways. So first, we're going to define what are our intuitive butterflies versus a triggered attachment anxiety, or let's call it a survival response, and how can we tell the difference? And then we're going to explore an experiential activity to help you sift and sort through the role that, let's say, your inner child and your inner critic might play in this dance between intuition and attachment anxiety. Then we're going to examine 7 questions as a type of relationship assessment using the chakra system as a framework for understanding the wisdom of your body and its energy centers. Okay. And I think this is really important because it's going to help you understand the embodied nature of not only your attachments, but also your intuition, right? And your own higher knowing or your own wisdom about things. Okay. So I invite you to grab a pencil and paper and just stick with me until the end of this segment. So the first thing I want to address, defining attachment anxiety versus our genuine intuition. Okay. So let's just restate the question. How do I distinguish my attachment anxiety from my gut intuition, right? My instinctual intuition, some higher knowing, let's call it. So I believe that not all butterflies are bad. It doesn't mean that every situation in which you have butterflies, that it's a bad situation, okay? It just means that it's likely that you should pay attention, right? There's information that is important for you to acknowledge here. And it's a call for you to use your discernment so that you can qualify the information you're receiving and make meaning of that experience. So one way to do this is to really just drop in and dialogue with the feelings you're having in the moment through things like meditation or creative activities. And that's going to allow you to lean into the automatic anxiety that kind of lights up your physical body, so that you can make sure, is this a real threat in the world of physical form, or as another energy stimulated that I need to pay attention to, right? Because we are defining, in this case, we are defining feelings as energy moving through your body. So your intuition, so attachment anxiety is usually more urgent. It's more concerned with the integrity of the body. It's more about survival fears, okay? Attachment threats, seeking safety, and it tends to be an automated response based on past experiences. Whereas your intuition, on the other hand, connects you to a larger, broader, bigger, and I would argue spiritual aspect of yourself that has no urgent concerns because it is everlasting, right? And it sees your life from a moon's eye view and perspective. So this part of yourself can be difficult to access unless you have moved away from threatening people and situations that stimulate survival concerns and impulses, because there's just no room for it in that circumstance. You have to protect the body first. So intuition really emerges when you are calm, you're focused, you are listening for the subtleties of your sensations, the signs, feelings, and messages. And usually this requires that you create some kind of safe container, context, or ritual in which you are intentionally extending the invitation to that wisdom, okay? And so knowing that relationships might be a hot topic for you, for example, you might feel the butterflies and then note if there's a sense of urgency around it. And then ask yourself to just be patient with it, right? To just lean into the ambivalence, lean into the ambiguity, and allow your environments to continue to move around you until new information and clarity emerges. So you learn to be still with doubt. You learn to be still with not knowing, and to be okay with not having to take action or make a decision right away. It's also useful to know that excitement and anxiety light up in the same part of the brain. And the difference is the narratives and the meaning that we assign to it, right? And the contexts in which we exist. And so I wouldn't want to give up all my excitement because I'm too afraid of anxiety, right? But I would pause to reflect on what the feeling is trying to tell me. And, another example of this, we tend to raise our voices when we're angry, but we also raise our voices when we're excited. If you've ever lived on top of a sports bar, you know what I mean. But if we don't know the language that each person is speaking, then we might assume that it's all bad. We might assume something and misjudge the situation. And so what we really want to do is learn how to speak our own inner language, to sift and sort through the subtleties of the emotions and the energy that's moving through our bodies, so that we can understand what it means when our body raises its voice. Because both our survival responses and our intuition, they are embodied experiences. And so the trick is getting to know your body really well and the subtleties of the energy moving through it, so that you can better discern their meaning and make better choices for yourself in curating your environments and in curating your partners. So I want to do a very simple exercise to illustrate what I mean viscerally and visually, okay? And before I do that, although I will make a recommendation, if you'd like to learn more about attachment styles and safety and proximity concerns, I do have a video on my YouTube channel. It's called Attachment Styles as Nervous System Responses. I'll leave a link to that in the replay of this video as well. And it'll teach you a little bit more about conceptualizing attachment as a nervous system response. Okay. And that will speak to the attachment anxiety and survival concerns. So now I'm just going to invite you. You can do this with me if you want, or you can just watch and do it later. So I like call this the triangle exercise, but in essence, you're just going to draw a triangle on the page. And when you say, oh, I feel anxious. So anxious is a big, I call it an umbrella term for recognizing an energy that indicates there are usually other more subtle threads and energies and feelings going on underneath it. So you might think of if you've got two sides at war with each other or in conflict, you might think of anxiety as the fog or the smoke that rises above the fray. So you're looking in the distance and you see the smoke in the distance and you say, oh, there's a fight going on over there. I better steer clear. But what we want to do is we kind of want to investigate and we want to find out what sides are at war, what parts of you are in conflict. So here's our, let me make sure you can see this. So here's our anxiety. Okay, so I feel anxiety, which means that I need to take a moment to lean in and investigate. I need to go a little bit deeper. That means there's a couple things in conflict. I need to find out what they are and create clarity around that. So you might drop in, you're feeling anxiety, so you might just drop it into your body. Where does the anxiety originate in my body? So for the sake of argument, let's say it's in my solar plexus, right? My abdomen. And when I go down there, what color is the anxiety? Well, maybe it's yellow, right? So I might color that in yellow. Okay, the anxiety is yellow. And if I go a little deeper, if I step into that yellow fog, what's the first form that you see? Well, maybe I see a crying child. Okay. So now I'm going to choose one of these bottom corners here on my triangle. And I'm going to create a representation of that child. All right. So I've got my crying child. Okay. Is there another character or part in that fog that seems to be protecting that child or disciplining that child, or somehow in relationship to that child, blended with that child and its expression? So let's say I see a parent who is protective, but they're protective by being too strict. So over here on the other side, they're in opposition. They seem to be in opposition to each other. I might draw a protective parent, right? And this parent maybe is a little bit domineering. They're sticking their finger up, hand on the hip, that kind of thing. Okay, so now we know that the anxiety is evolving from some underlying dynamic that's going on between these two characters. I'm just using two for now, but sometimes it can be more. And so let's say, okay, but so now usually inside there's a triangulation because there's also the part of you that witnesses the anxiety, right? That isn't quite overtaken by either of these two parts. So let's call this, I'm just going to put a star there. I'm going to call that part your observing self. You might call it your spiritual self. It's the part of you that's connected to a broader perspective that can perceive this relationship as we map it out, right? So what's in the middle? So you might imagine if this is like a baseball field and this is home base, right? Then this might be the pitcher's mound, let's say. And here you are standing in the middle. This is your ego. This is your personality. This is the way you sift and sort through your feelings. This is the part of you that can say, oh, I'm having a big feeling, right? So now we've just created this kind of what I think of as a visual anchor so that you can start to sift and sort and create clarity around what are the inner voices that are in war at this time. And instead of just calling it anxiety and then taking action right away and then throwing out the baby with the bathwater, we take a moment to look underneath it and find out what's going on here, because most likely this is going to express the underlying need This is going to express all of the, let's say, I'm going to call them attachment stories, but maybe they're limiting beliefs. Beliefs around how that need is supposed to be met. This is going to be, I'm going to call it your higher self, that is able to look at and assume the perspective of each part and understand the needs and the desires and also the misperceptions that they carry. And ideally, you want your higher self to partner with your ego so that they can meet the needs of the inner child. Then they can satisfy the standards of the inner critic, right? Or the protector that exists inside of you. So that instead of these things working in operation, they're working in harmony. And that's your job, is to make sure they're working in harmony. Okay. So this is just a very brief overview of how we can, and a little exercise for how you might start to dig into a moment of anxiety. But I go into this a lot more in depth on my YouTube channel. I have a playlist called Hot Seat Interviews, and you'll see how we use this kind of anchoring image in practice to help you sift and sort through the anxiety and what it might be telling you so that you can instead tap into your intuition, right? And allow that to inform how you're going to integrate these different parts of yourself, heal the inner child, so to speak, right? Okay, so that's one example. So move that to the side for now. And just let me know in the comments or in the chat there, how is this resonating with you? Does that make sense? Do you feel like that is helpful to you? If you did it with me, what are some of the parts that came up? What did you notice? I'd love to see that. And again, I'll leave a link to learn more about that in the replay of this segment. Now, the next part of this, the last part of this, the third part of this that I would like to address is 7 questions to help you ascertain what aspect of you is in operation when you are considering remaining in a relationship with someone. So is this my attachment anxiety or is it my intuition? Now, I like to organize these things according to the chakra system, which is an ancient framework for understanding how energy evolves and develops through our bodies from the tantric yogic tradition. And I think it's a really elegant template through which we can start to understand and filter our sensations and the way energy expresses itself through our thoughts, feelings, and our actions. Okay, because it allows us to tap into our intuition in a different way. So I'm going to walk you through sort of a mini assessment, and we're going to look at how am I perceiving or experiencing my relationship through this lens. And I'm going to start from the top down. We're going to focus on 7 embodied chakras. There are other chakras in the energy body outside of the physical body, but for today, we're just going to focus on the embodied ones. So I'm going to start with the crown, and the idea that the crown is an energy center that connects you to your higher knowing, that it can influence your sense of meaning and purpose in life. And you want to ask yourself, can you access that? Particularly in the context of this relationship. When you're with this person, do you still have access to your own sense of meaning and purpose? And if not, then you may be in survival mode. It may be anxiety getting in the way. If you want to ask yourself, can you think about things like legacy or generativity? Or do you feel as though you're always kind of living moment to moment, right? There's no ability to kind of visualize what comes next. Questions you might ask yourself are, am I in touch with my spiritual beliefs? Does my partner support and participate in what I find meaningful and purposeful in life? Okay. That's the crown. We move down into the third eye. So this really denotes our ability to see patterns and to make predictions without getting caught in limiting beliefs or a sense of urgency, right? Because, spirit is never in a rush, because the possibilities are endless in an abundant universe. And that is how the higher self, the higher aspect of yourself would perceive it. So when you start thinking things like, I'll never find another love like this, so I better grit my teeth and bear it, then you're likely to be in survival mode. So you want to ask yourself, Do we share the same vision for the future? Do we have the same goals and priorities? Can I see them caring for me when I'm old and sick or in need? Am I able to learn from my mistakes and cultivate wisdom as a result of it? Or am I caught in a cyclical pattern that I can't seem to get out of? Right? Third eye, right? So you want to think about that. Then we have the throat, right? And the throat allows us to speak our truth. So when we are afraid of expressing what's going on inside of us, or on the other hand, when we think we have to shout in order to be heard, then we may be stuck in a survival mode pattern, right? An attachment anxiety pattern. Now, on the other hand, maybe we fear retribution or punishment for speaking out. And so we might adopt the idea that we are just inherently bad or invaluable. And so we might see ourselves as a burden to someone else, right? We might, on the other hand, maybe we rail against people because we feel like we're not seen and we're not heard. And so we're forcing ourselves into someone else's experience and we don't respect their boundaries because otherwise we feel like we don't exist. Okay. So you want to ask yourself, can I speak my truth in this relationship? Do I suppress my voice or do I say things I don't mean to hide my vulnerability? Do I only say what they want to hear to please them, or do I shout regardless of what they say? Am I listening to respond, right? Am I listening to react as opposed to communicate because I feel like I'm never heard? So if those are things that are going on in the relationship, it's attachment anxiety. Okay. Survival mode response, what I call it. And we have the heart, right? So in the heart, if it feels unsafe to open your heart because you are afraid of getting hurt, survival mode and attachment anxieties may be in operation. You might believe that love is a finite resource and it comes from experiencing things like conditions of worth. Everything feels like it's a tit for tat and there's a scoreboard hanging above the relationship. Maybe there is very little giving without an expectation of getting an equal measure. Maybe you are over-identified with the idea of love being an expression of services in exchange for some kind of reward, right? Maybe there's a pattern of betrayal in your relationships because you tend to betray yourself when you get into them, okay? So questions you might ask yourself: have I sacrificed parts of myself in this relationship? Is there some element of grief, betrayal, or codependency that has become a recurring theme in my relationships? Do I struggle to love myself and honor my needs first? Then we have the solar plexus, and this is the upper abdomen. So this is when we are connecting to a sense of our own personal agency, identity, and will. And so if we feel powerless or as if we can't do anything without our partners, or you can't do anything right for your partner, then you may find yourself slipping into attachment anxieties and survival mode. So you might ask yourself, do I doubt my power and love? Do I worry that my ambitions or successes might outshine my partner? Do I anticipate failure in my relationships? Do I work hard to keep the relationship afloat and carry all the responsibility for its success? If so, that can stem from attachment anxiety as opposed to intuition, right? Then you might look at the sacral, which is beneath the navel and between the hips. This connects us to our emotions, to creativity, to abstraction, and the capacity to hold dualities. And it thrives on movement and change and variety. And it really helps us spark our consciousness through the currents of emotions that navigate our bodies, right? This is what connects us to our emotions, our emotional expression, but also our emotional boundaries. So it's really important in the sacral that there's opportunities for playfulness, for humor, for pleasure, right? Which keeps us reaching out to learn more about what we really like and enjoy. So you want to ask yourself, do you feel safe expressing a wide range of emotional needs or desires? Or do you contract with a fear of abandonment or of reprisal or of feeling like you're too much, okay, and yet not enough? Do you struggle with your boundaries being too loose or too rigid in the relationship? In which case, then it may be that you're stuck in survival mode or attachment anxiety. And lastly, we have the root. And this is the chakra that is in the genital region, lower spine, perineum area of the body. And its fundamental job is connecting us to our physical bodies and our sense of belonging in the world, simply just to have the right to be and to exist. And so it is deeply influenced by our attachment concerns and our survival fears, especially in early childhood, and can be disrupted if we experience things like trauma, neglect, or abuse. And those influences can be very primal, pre-verbal even, okay? And so this impacts our sensitivity to fight, flight, or freeze responses and how we respond to threats, attachment threats included. And so you want to reflect on questions like, do I feel physically safe? Am I comfortably seated in my body? Do I suppress my needs to avoid vocalizing them out of fear, right? Can I experience feelings of ease and excitement when I'm with my partner? Can I trust myself to know the difference? Do I trust myself to keep myself safe, right? So in addition to experiencing body integrity, it's also about the capacity to trust yourself and your own resiliency and integrity. Okay. Now, if these questions resonate with you or you'd like to learn more about it, I do have a course called Soul Attachments, which we are delivering live at this time. And you can still join us and catch up with the replays. If you'd like to learn more about that, I'll leave a link to that in the caption of the replay as well. So I just want to give some final thoughts and wrap up this particular segment. So as we kind of bring all of this together, looking at the dance between our attachment anxieties and our intuitive wisdom, I want to take a moment to reflect on what we've explored. So first, we took a look at how not all butterflies mean that it's a bad situation, right? We raise our voices when we're excited, but we also raise our voices when we're angry. And unless we lean in and take the time to sift and sort through the subtleties of the energy moving through our bodies, we can lump it all together and wind up throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Right? So I want you to look at words of like ambivalence, ambiguity, doubt, anxiety. I want you to understand these things as like the fog above the fray, and that it is an invitation to look closer, to look deeper, and you can use our triangle exercise to do that, right? To look at what parts of me are in conflict right now, and how can I access my higher knowing so that I can bring them into collaboration rather than into conflict, right? And then we delved into the chakra system as we just reviewed and took a look at how the map of the energy centers in our bodies can help us tune into, and their special gifts can help us tune into if a relationship is in service of your greatest good and how your intuition might be leaning into that. Okay. Now, one thing I want to add here is that distinguishing between attachment fears and our intuition is not just about avoiding pitfalls in relationships, right? It really is part of this quest for self-discovery and for looking for opportunities to grow, both as an individual and in healthy and loving interdependent relationships. So we are learning to listen, really listen to the wisdom of our body and of our spirit and to the energy that's moving through our bodies. And to remember that the ultimate goal isn't to find love somewhere out there. It is to cultivate a love inside that deeply resonates with who you are, right? And sometimes that means acknowledging that not every good person we meet is necessarily going to be a good partner for you. And that's okay. Because when we understand that, it liberates us from this pressure to force connections that aren't really meant to be, which allows us to focus instead on the journey of evolution that we are on and finding partners that are a good fit. So someone who shows up with the gifts of, let's say, each chakra, who seems to be a good person, you don't owe them anything because they are a good person. And it's not that you should love them because they are a good person. Being a good person is baseline. Okay. Next comes all that you need to know and understand about compatibility and balancing your values and priorities in a long-term partnership. So I hope that that helps, and then that makes sense. And I would love to see in the comments there how you're digesting this, if any of this resonates with you, to let me know that I'm on the right track. Okay, I had this shakes in my body when I was trying to find a way to introduce myself to a woman that I was attracted to with the hope to take her on a date. I had no idea that it was other than thinking it may be anxiety. I just went to approach myself with courage. Thinking about it now, it was a combination of anxiety and fear of being rejected and saying the wrong thing. I was really nervous, but I just decided to be genuine, kind, and authentic. Thank you for sharing that. This resonates with me. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, great. All right. So I will, if there's no other questions, this helps a lot. Okay, good. So if there's no other questions, I'll hop on to our next question that was submitted. Okay. How do you creatively help a partner who struggles understanding and communicating their needs and wants and boundaries? Okay. So if you have a partner that struggles to recognize their own needs and boundaries, it can be really hard for them to communicate with you because maybe for them the words feel jumbled, and it can lead to things like mixed signals in relationships. Now, if you struggle with an insecure attachment style yourself, then it can be twice as difficult to show up as that secure sounding board for them because their confusion and their mixed signals are going to perpetually trigger you, right? However, if both parties are in agreement that they want to show up authentically and with a generosity of spirit to the relationship, and both parties agree that they are going to prioritize each other's needs and wants as highly as they do their own, then you can find a way to navigate through it. Now, usually this requires that both individuals are working on themselves internally as well as working on the relationship together, right? Now, usually I approach this using what I call my HIP communication formula, and that stands for Heal Your Conflict Blueprint, Inspire Devotion, and Practice Emotional Intimacy. So within that framework, we really address more of the specific details around communication in those spaces. So how to formulate your words, how to connect to the energy behind the words, so that you can create growth opportunities within the relationship using things like safe and soft strategies in communication, which are more or less effective depending on someone's attachment style. Now, that includes how can you maintain your sense of individual autonomy and integrity, even when the relationship might feel unstable or as if you have succumbed to a triggering event, so to speak. Because it really requires adopting a model for understanding how we might view a secure person responding to that situation. And this is called security priming, they call it. I would also note that it is worth asking ourselves, not just how would a secure person act, but also how do individuals with insecure attachment perceive and receive support? And learn how to receive, because I often find that receiving is the most difficult part of this. And so that is really where I want to focus our exploration for this particular segment today. And to do this, I'm going to reference a survey that I conducted with my online community a few months ago, and we got 200 respondents. And basically, I asked my students what made them feel supported and inspired by love. And in their responses, we got about 6 primary themes or traits that they seem to look for in a partner. And so what I'd really like to do in this segment is examine what those 6 traits are. So I invite you to grab a pen and paper if you want to write these down. And if you want to learn more about my HIP communication formula with the Courageous Communicator program, I'll leave a link to a free introductory training for that in the somewhere around the replay of this segment. Okay. Now, before I dive into these 6 traits, I just want to note that most of these traits are not about what a partner is giving to them, or even how a partner might respond to them, but it's really more about how a partner shows up with full presence and a sense of themselves. So in other words, a lot of people feel supported by a partner that just seems to be secure within themselves, as opposed to what they are doing, creating, or trying to affect for someone else. Okay. So it's less about trying to fix something. And because when people try to do that, even when it's with the best of intentions, folks with insecure attachment can kind of perceive that and receive that more as dismissive behavior, as or some way of questioning their agency, or some way of trying to maneuver them somehow. And so while we may think, I want to do all these things in order to make the things better for them, that's not how they receive it. Okay. So what they preferred was simply feeling a certain way in someone else's presence. And there were certain things indicated that helped foster that feeling. So what were those things? Well, let's dive into them. So the first trait that was identified was consistency. Okay. So to explain what that means, I'm going to quote one of our survey respondents. Consistency means that you know what you want, and you don't wait for me to say what I want first. And you don't change what you think or feel because I think or feel something else. It degrades my trust in your judgment, and it makes me feel like you don't know who you really are or what you really want. So how can you know if you really love me or want me, or just someone that fits your fantasy of romance? I'm not interested in being with someone who's just in love with the idea of being in love. So that's one example. Being consistent means being consistent with who you are and what you want and what you think and feel. It's not even mentioning consistency in the behaviors and the ways that you show up, although I would add that is important. Now, the second thing, which is similar but a little bit different, is self-possession. So this kind of boils down to knowing your value and avoiding seeking too much external validation for it within the relationship. So when you've been taught your whole life to suppress your needs because they were a burden or because they were deemed to be a secondary concern for the people around you, we can have a habit of looking to others to validate our right and to even have our needs, to validate our right to have our feelings and to express them. Okay. So I want to quote another survey respondent here who said, I had a partner who said he won't listen to me or validate my concerns. So what do I do? Now, the survey respondent said, this can be very annoying. I might not choose to engage with someone like that and walk away because I feel like they get disproportionately upset and give you too much power in the relationship. Okay. This makes me feel like I'm always going to trigger them, and so it's not safe to be around them, and I tiptoe around them as if walking on eggshells. All right. So this is what we mean by self-possession. So someone who's capable of validating themselves, of knowing their worth, and doesn't necessarily look to the other person to do that for them. Now, one thing I will add here is you would be wise to seek out partners that are validating, and you would be generous and kind and high of character and generous of spirit to offer validation. I would recommend that you offer validation to your partners. But there's a difference between wanting that in a relationship and seeking it out and making good choices to choose partners that are validating and to be a generous partner by offering validation. There's a difference between that and desperately needing it and allowing your sense of self-worth and personal authority to hinge on whether or not someone offers that to you. And if they don't, chase them down because you think they have the power to imbue you with that, right? So self-possession is being able to hold that understanding for yourself. Now, the next trait was boundaried. So that means that we are clearly communicating that we are not a doormat, but we're not trying to control anybody either. So when we are establishing our boundaries, we might say no to something, but saying no to someone is not rejecting them. It is inviting them to know the real you, right? So for example, let's say that your insecure partner texts you in the middle of the night for a booty call, or maybe they want an endless sexting extravaganza, instead of, in that case, dropping everything to run over there, or kind of laboring over capturing the perfect naked pic, or wording it just so that you seduce them into wanting you. You might try replying instead, hey, thanks for the message, but I don't really text that late at night. If you'd like to get together, then I'm happy to join you for a happy hour after work. Would be great to see you there. Right? So knowing that that type of invitation, that type of, if you know you want something more serious, not allowing them to kind of skirt under that boundary too soon, right? And establishing it so that you create opportunities for them to show up in ways that would earn your trust, so that eventually you allow that type of intimacy to unfold, right? That's just one example. Also being able to put a little backbone into stating what your needs and wants might be, right? It's okay for you to do this, but it's not okay for you to do that. And this is why. And this is because I need this, because I like to feel that. And this is what I prioritize in relationship. And I'm just extending the invitation if that's something you want to participate in or not, right? That's boundaries. Number 4, being passionate. So being passionate is really just about admiring someone for their own interests and hobbies, right? But not just that, like maybe you're passionate about binge watching Netflix, right? It's a little bit more than that. Maybe you're passionate about scrolling through TikTok or what have you. It's more about passionate pursuits that light you up on a level that's more about expressing your own life force energy, that engages you with life, that absorbs you to some extent. It means that there's something, it indicates to someone that you have a deeper and more profound sense of connection to your creativity, right? That there's something that lights you up, and that is something that grounds you in your own experience and in your autonomy, which is very attractive to someone. Okay. And it's also inspiring to someone. So that's number 4. Number 5, being non-judgmental, right? So this means someone who can express themselves with compassion and without criticism or judgment. So this is sort of like really focusing on what you appreciate about someone, as opposed to focusing on what you don't have or what you don't want, and holding everything to a standard of perfection. So I'm going to use maybe soft strategies as an example for this. Let's say that you are approaching a partner that has more of an avoidant attachment style, and you want to connect with them more. Instead of saying we don't connect enough, you want to shift your focus to what it is that you are wanting, and express appreciation for what you have, and just express that you want more of it. So, wow, I really enjoy spending time with you. How does it make you feel? That really makes me feel warm and connected and playful when we're together. What do you think about that? I really like that feeling. It's really important to me to have that in a relationship in general. And I'm really glad that I have some of that with you. I'm just wondering, is there an opportunity for us to have more of this in relationship? Can we make some plans? Then you add in positive action language, which is the specificity to your communication. So you might come up with a suggestion. Maybe we can make plans this Saturday. I'd love to spend some more time with you. What do you think? Right? How do you enjoy spending time together? Maybe we can make more opportunities for that as well. So it's about, instead of we don't spend enough time together, you're ignoring me, you're this, you're that, which is more of a blaming orientation, you shift to soft strategies, which is an orientation of appreciation. It's an invitation to co-creative solutions, and it's also offering a specific path to repair, right? A specific path to a solution to the situation. Non-judgmental. So just being non-judgmental in your communication. And lastly, someone who's discerning. So this kind of harkens back to being able to have healthy boundaries. We might also call this like just having the ability to say no when you need to. This also means that as much as you say no to some things, you also will say yes to others. And your yes really means nothing without your no, right? Because if you say yes to everything, then who's to know if that's who you really are, what you really like, or what you really care about, right? And so when you're able to say no to things and you make choices based on an internal understanding of who you are and what you want and what you like, that gives a partner a sense of, let's call it challenge or intrigue, because there's something to butt up against. There's a different perspective to learn from, right? You have something to contribute to their experience, not just be a supportive arm of their experience, right? So I don't need someone to support me. I need someone to show up as an equal partner. And support can be a part of that, but it's not the primary goal, right? It allows your partners to feel like you're choosing them, not settling for them or opting for them or needing them. You're choosing them. That's what discernment means. Someone who's discerning, right? Are they choosing me or are they just compelled towards me? Kind of speaks back to the first question we had too, which was, are they just in love with the idea of being in love, or do they really know who I am and are choosing me because of their own discernment, right? So these were the 6 traits that were really important, and I'll say them one more time. Consistency, and in this case, we're talking about being consistent within yourself, your own preferences, the way you show up. Self-possession, so someone who can validate themselves, knows their own worth, and doesn't seek too much external validation for that. Being boundaried, so someone who puts a little backbone into it, who doesn't give everything away all at once, has some firm but flexible boundaries around what they will and won't do, and is capable of saying no, right? Passion, having your own passions. So hobbies and pursuits that are yours, that are something that lights you up, that helps you tap into your own creativity and life force energy. Being non-judgmental. So we might bring this into the realms of communication, how you communicate what it is that you want and need. The example I used was soft strategies, expressing appreciation and creating co-creative opportunities to have more of what it is that you appreciate, instead of holding it in comparison to a standard of perfection and then judging it as lacking in some way through judgmental communications or criticism, right? Then being discerning. So knowing that you say no just as much as you say yes, that you are choosing someone rather than defaulting to being with them because of attachment anxiety, needs for validation, or struggling with settling for something because you have limiting beliefs about what's possible in the world, right? So that you are making a discerning choice. And there's just one final thought that I would offer on this. And I think that it's important to realize that, once again, even though we may have all these traits, okay, it's important not to assume that because someone shows up in what appears to be the best way on paper, that you owe them your fidelity, or that you owe them, that you should feel something for them and therefore you need to be with them, right? Remember, someone who shows up in a positive way along these 6 traits and dimensions is baseline, right? Good people is baseline in the world. Even if you haven't encountered that, I want you to adopt that belief right now. The world is full of good people. That's just baseline. After that, we're looking at what are the compatibility dimensions for values and priorities and a long-term vision together in order to be with someone long-term, right? Additionally, in communication, you also want to avoid trying to figure something out for someone in advance. You want to try to avoid figuring out how the conversation is going to go beforehand, and instead just allow it to unfold in the moment, right? So maybe this goes back to what we were talking about with the non-judgmental communication, right? If you are trying to create that space where you're trying to help someone who is struggling with understanding and identifying their own needs, you're trying to create that space for them. You can use things like safe and soft strategies to create it, And you can show up with 100% of your good intentions and 100% of all the tools you've learned and 100% of your willingness to create that space for them. But remember, it is still only 50% of what they need in order to be more secure with you. Because you showing up like that is 50% of what's required. Them being able to do the inner work so they can allow it in is the other 50% of what they need, right? So be aware of your limitations. You might embody all of these traits, but you can only knock on the door. They have to be willing to let you in. Okay. So also be aware of your limitations. You can't do it all for them. Okay. So I want to pause there and just ask if any of this is resonating with you. If you connect with these traits, maybe there are traits I haven't mentioned that you find particularly helpful and supportive and attractive in a partner. And I'd love to see those in the chat as well, or in the comments there. And so I'm just going to take a pause and address our comments here so far. Okay. Having been in spiritual practice for 60 years, there is also the karmic aspect. I have karma with someone I need to fulfill whether I like it or not. That is how I feel anyway. Took the test and I'm secure type and haven't run into the situation before. I am learning from you, however. So one of the things, so Cindy Dale is someone who talks a lot about chakras and karma and karmic debts and things like that in relationships. And so Cindy Dale goes so far as to say that every decision we make in our 20s is based on a karmic contract. But part of the lesson with a karmic contract is that you do not have to live it out. Part of the lesson is you experience it so that you recognize your own power in changing that contract and that you step into your own power and revise that. You do not have to relive it. This is why I have mixed feelings about going into past life stuff, because sometimes people think, oh, well, it happened in a past life. That's why I'm living it now and I have to see it through, or I need to repeat that pattern in some way. And that's not the case. I think that the only reason you would seek that knowledge is so that it would give you the tools that you would need to make a different choice and to let it be a past life, not this life, right? And that speaks to karmic contracts. Because there's karma and dharma. And so dharma is just bypassing all that, right? Karma is more like the soul and the ego's kind of agreement with each other as part of creating the grain of sand around which you will weave your pearls of wisdom in this iteration, right? In this lifetime. But dharma is the deeper spiritual knowing and understanding that you don't have to go through all of that because you are a lighted being of love and compassion overall, and you don't have to earn things in order to live out this grand experiment of separate but together. So that's one thing I might offer. What you just said resonated. They have to do their own inner work just as we have to. Yes. So you can show up 100% with your good intentions and the tools that you've learned in creating a safe space for them. But that is still only 50% of what they need to show up as well. 50% of that is going to be the work they have to be doing internally so that they can open the door. Right? Yeah. So with that, thank you everybody who joined me live. I so appreciate you showing up, and also those of you that shared in the chat. Let's see, I do see a private message. Okay. How do you communicate with a person that says, I've been feeling the pressure of the expectation to respond, sometimes energy and intuition, there's no words to describe it, but all I know is that I have to follow it. There doesn't have to be a reason, it simply is. I just don't feel safe with you. So in that case, I would just respect what they say, right? And that safety, it may stem from that 50-50, right? So maybe there's ways that we can do a self-evaluation and inventory and look at how did we show up. And it's not just the things that we said or the things that we did, it's also the energy that we carried. And so if there's, and I'm just stretching this into the realms of theory and concept, but if there is within us an insecurity or an anxiety or a distrust of ourselves, then our partners can feel it. They can experience our disconnection from ourselves. And if we're seeking something in the relationship to fill that gap, or if we are seeking something from them to create that stability within us, then they are going to experience that as a disconnection within you. And then they'll feel disconnected from you, and then they may take it in and become disconnected from themselves. And now all of a sudden they don't feel safe, right? And so this is how insecurities become transmitted to one another, even if by osmosis. Now, as I said before, this is 50-50. So 50% of that is how we might show up, but the other 50% of that is how they are taking it in or not, right? Or their own baggage that gets stimulated by your environments, by our partners, and by our own internal triggers, right? So yes, we can take a personal inventory and we can build our skill sets and we can realize things about ourselves, and we can take action on addressing those things about ourselves in a loving and compassionate way. And then we have to realize that's the extent of what I could do to learn from this and move on. The rest of it is something that they would have had to do to work with, and allowing that to be their journey and their path. So I hope that helps. Okay, if my partner is not open to discussing needs, vulnerable, instead he consistently says, I'm too needy and demanding, what do you recommend I could do without being too controlling or overbearing? So those questions are easier to answer when you have a specific example, right? Some of it is communication. So some of it is the way that you're expressing your needs. Now, oftentimes, if we feel needy and we attract partners who accuse us of being needy, sneezing is good. It means we're releasing some energy. You're too demanding. You're too needy. So if they're feeling anxiety when you express a need, that anxiety is being that you expressing a need is triggering a part of them that says it's not okay to have them, right? And so instead of connecting with you as needing or wanting something in the same way that they might need or want something, it's just sort of, it creates a split, and it's like, no, it's you, it's not me. And so part of that is communication. I mean, sometimes there really are words that we can use that can change that. And in the Courageous Communicator, we talk a lot more about that. Part of it is also recognizing that if you've come to a place, I mean, if it's a partner that you've been with for a long time, there's a slightly different way to handle this than if it's a partner that you've not been with for a long time, because relationships have developmental challenges, and there's certain emotional patterns of holding that evolve over time. So depending on the developmental phase of the relationship is kind of important. And also looking at, you know, what have been the patterns and the projected stories that are evolving between you would really factor into how you create that space for someone. But in essence, you know, I'm sharing my feelings because I want to be closer to you, not because I'm trying to make you responsible for them. It's one way to kind of shut it down. Also, sometimes looking at when we're able to kind of connect to a sense of awareness, you know, we stop worrying about being needy and we start realizing, no, this is just my criteria for what is required before I will commit myself to something, mind, body, and spirit, right? So it's sort of like, to some level, it's kind of like a take it or leave it. And you have to decide where in your relationship that threshold lies, right? So I don't really know enough to be able to give you a comprehensive answer to that, but hopefully just reflecting on those things theoretically might help. Are relationships a mirror? Yes, I believe relationships are a mirror, but I think that's one role they play. I think relationships are also a co-creative process. So a mirror exists, and that's one of the benefits of relationships. But there's also, I think relationships as a mirror sort of function up to a certain point. And then I do think that there's what I call ascended partnership that evolves, where the mirror just becomes one of the tools that you as a couple use in your collaborative efforts to raise the vibration of the collective. So the mirror is most active probably during a phase of karmic relationships or during a phase of soulmate relationships, right? Because the soulmate's function is to connect you to your soul. So what's the best way to do that? Well, to hold up a mirror, right? A soulmate, when they come into your life, they hold up a mirror and they show you where are the parts that you're pinching yourself off from the love that is ever present and connected to the essence of your being, to your soul. So you date someone like that, and why are they not calling me? Why they're abandoning me? I must not be lovable. I must not be this. I must not be that. I have to pretzel myself to do this. Am I right or am I wrong? I'm questioning myself about everything. And so what's happened? Well, they've held up a mirror, and now you see all this gunk that is in your dusty corners, right? Your internal dusty corners. And now you have the opportunity, now that you recognize, ooh, I've got all these stories going on. I've got all this negative thoughts, limiting beliefs, opinions about myself that are crowding out the space and pinching me off from the massive flow of love that I am asking for, which is a huge energetic request, right? So now I have the opportunity to sweep out those corners. And you do that, and maybe the relationship evolves into a new iteration, becomes more than just a soulmate relationship. Or maybe it ends because that was its entire purpose. And you now have expanded a little bit wider into your space. You've expanded a little bit wider into the essence of your being. And so that relationship was primarily a mirror. But now let's say it does evolve, or you find another relationship where it moves beyond that. Well, now the mirror is always going to be there because that's an important growth tool. But now there's other tools that you've got, like knowing what it's like to move through states of togetherness and separateness. And when you're in a relationship, there's a third thing, a third energy form that's created between you. And what are we gonna add to this energy form so that it exists in a generative way, right? That it contributes to our lives, but also to our community, to our children, to a sense of legacy. That's not just mirroring. That's more than that. That is generative, it's creative, it's inception sometimes, right? It's evolution. So yes, relationships are mirrors. Some relationships are pure mirrors, but that's not all that they are, or could be. Married for 3 years, okay. All right, with that, I'm going to say thank you to all of you for joining. I hope that was helpful. And again, we'll be back in to answer questions the third Thursday of the month. I look forward to speaking with you more. Any other questions or things that come up between now and our next call, please feel free to type them in the Facebook group and tag me. I usually try to respond within 48 hours. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week.